Hi, it's Juliet. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make faux boro beads. Faux boro is a way of using soft glass to get that ethereal boro-esque kind of a look. There's a whole lot of variations you can do in terms of glass and color with and without silver, method of application, etc. that can change the look of the bead. So I'm going to show you one particular formula, if you will, that uses a striking red glass, iris gold frit, and silver. In terms of the glass, you'll need some sort of a clear. I'm using a Frit 006. You'll want a striking red. The striking red and an iris yellow frit is what makes the boro magic. In terms of tools, we'll need some sort of a tray to hold our frit. I like to use these au jus stainless steel bowls. They work pretty well if you have a lot of frit. If you only have a little bit of frit, they're probably too deep. So you might want to use something smaller. I also have a dental tool that I use for pressing and flattening small details, and a pair of tweezers like this is handy for pulling stringer. Okay, so first I want to prepare some strips of silver leaf. And I'm going to open up a page and just use my tool to kind of tweak and cut off bits that I can wrap around the bead. I'm going to be making fairly small beads, so I don't need very big amounts of silver foil. And I'm going to set those down there on my marvering pad. You have to be careful that they don't blow away. You don't want to breathe on them or, heaven forbid, cough on them. They'll go flying. You also want to make sure your marvering pad doesn't have any drops of water on it, because then it'll really stick to it. It'll be very difficult to get it off. So I'm just going to pull out 3 strips. That should be big enough for what I need here. So I'm going to show you how to pull some iris yellow stringer to use in faux boro beads. So I'm taking a clear rod. I'm using a Frit 006. And I'm just melting the end of it. And then I'm going to dip it in my frit bowl and pick up a bunch of frit. I'm going to melt it, and then I'm going to dip it again. I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times until I have a pretty good gather of the iris yellow frit on the end. And then I'm going to pull that into a stringer. Sometimes as you press it into the frit bowl, it may get a little wide, so you can marver it a little bit to straighten it out. There we go. That's the last gather, and I'll melt that in and pull it into a stringer next. Okay, so I moved the gather into my non-dominant hand, and I've got my tweezers for pulling a stringer in my right hand. These are the kind where you push them to open, and when you let go, it holds closed. All right, so I'm going to get my gather good and hot. I'm going to take it out, let the super bright glow go, but you still want it to be yellow. Pinch and grab a bit, and then pull it out into a stringer. The slower you pull it, the faster it will be. Fatter it will be. The faster you pull it, the thinner it will be. All right, I'm going to just flame cut that and set that down to cool. Okay, let's get started. We're going to lay down a footprint of clear. I'm just going to make a small round bead, so I don't need to put down too much glass. So this first bead is going to just be a simple layered frit bead. So there's a bit of clear. And now I'm going to round that up a bit, and then I'm going to take my transparent red. When you're rounding the bead, you can look at how much of the glass is above the mandrel, and you put the side that has more on the top, and then let gravity pull it down. It will be in and out of the flame multiple times with the striking red, so you don't really have to worry about striking it. It's naturally going to help it happen anyway as part of the heating and the collecting of the frit and then the melting of the frit. So I'm going to do one wrapper along the left edge, and then a thicker wrap along the middle, and then another smaller wrap around the right side. And I find that encases the bead pretty well and allows the glass to travel to the mandrel hole. So add a little bit more to the left side if you think you need it. I just marvered that into a small size barrel. Now what I'm doing is I'm getting it warm, and then I'm going to roll it onto the silver leaf and pick it up and wrap it around the bead. So I'm just going to roll that in there and push the ends up against it. And I am below the flame at this point. I don't want to burn it off. I want to burnish it in, which basically means just rub it in so that it adheres pretty well to the glass. And then I'm going to slowly introduce it to the flame far away from the torch head and allow that to melt in, because you want it to actually adhere to the glass and not just vaporize in a super hot flame. So it's not going to look silver anymore, but it is still there, and that will help provide a reaction with the iris gold frit. So I'm going to let my bead cool a little bit, and you'll notice I'm just kind of stacking up a little mountain range in my au jus bowl of my frit, because I find it's easier to roll in that. So now that my bead has cooled a bit, you can hear that. It's a little bit cooler and solid, and I just want to get the surface just slightly warm, just enough to pick up some frit. And I'm just going to do some light touches of frit around it, maybe a little bit more. I didn't have it quite hot enough in a few spots. There we go. Knock off some of the extra on the edges there. And then I'm going to gently melt that in. Now at this point, you want to make sure that you do not have a reducing flame, that you keep your flame neutral or perhaps a little bit more towards the oxygenating side. If you end up with a reduction flame at this point, what's going to happen to that reaction is going to just turn into dragon poop and not make a very pretty bead. Okay, I'm going to turn down my propane just a little bit so it's a little cooler for working on the stringer. And I'm just going to apply some random swirls and squiggles and dots and some just little decorative patterns. The iris frit tends to spread out pretty rapidly on the bead, so you don't need to completely cover everything. It will naturally spread out along the bead and sort of fill in the gaps. I'm going to add a few dots here and there just to give it another splash of reaction in various spots on the bead. And you can sort of see from the glow where the silver is and where the silver isn't. So I'm just going to put down some random decorations. You could be more precise about it if you chose to. Now I'm going to keep this in the back. It's actually below the flame so that it's staying warm. While it's staying warm there, either below or above my flame, I am melting my clear glass, and I want to encase this with the clear. So I'm going to again do my left side, put a good wrap on the left side, flame cut that, and keeping it warm below the flame while I'm melting my gather of clear. And now I'm going to put a swipe on around the middle. I didn't quite make it all the way. That's okay. You can melt a little bit more and then push it down in there. Okay, that finishes that middle swipe. Keeping my bead warm, and I'm going to put a gather around the right side. And there we go. Now it's fully encased, and I want to melt that in and even it out. And this part is handy if you have a little dental tool. You can kind of help ooze the clear over the frit below. When you're heating this, I'm just glancing the flame on the top edge of the clear. I'm not trying to get the whole core of the bead hot, because I want it to hold its shape. I just want the clear layer to melt and then flow. Okay, so now I'm going to heat it up fully and reshape it into a nice round bead.
So all in all, these beads turned out really fantastic. And be sure to like and subscribe to see the rest of our Frit videos. We have a whole bunch in the series coming out soon. I'm sure you guys will love them. Also, feel free to keep paying attention to this video because we will be showing you a little bit more about what kind of experimentation you can do with a whole bunch of different gem tone colors to get a really cool effect using this iris gold frit.
So the last two demonstrations was using the Striking Red 076. I've also played around a little bit with Transparent Emerald Green 030 and Cobalt Blue 060. In addition to the Iris Gold Frit, this was a light Iris Gold that I was using. I've also played around with a medium Iris Yellow Frit and also an Iris Green Frit. You'll notice they all say the word iris in it, and there's a number of other Frit colors out there that have the word iris in it, so I suggest you go out and experiment. I'll show you a couple of the beads that I played around with and describe what I used. So this one here, I used the cobalt, and I applied the cobalt from stringers as opposed to encasing the whole thing. You can see there's little wisps. And for this one, I used the light Iris Gold Frit, just dotted it on. And I put silver on part of this bead. It wasn't around the whole thing. It's kind of blah. Not a whole lot going on there. I think I probably didn't have enough blue to bring out some of the reactions. So this next one here is the same colors, but I encased the whole thing with the blue, with the cobalt blue transparent. Then I put on the silver, and then I used the light Iris Gold Frit. And you can see this creates a lot of visual interest in the bead. There's a fair amount of reactions going on. You see different shades of the blue, and you can see some of the silver dragon scales showing up. This next bead here, I covered the base with cobalt blue, but I put it down with blobs. And the blobs were thicker as opposed to like putting it on with a thin stringer. So you have more thick areas of the base blue. Then I applied the light Iris Frit, and then on top of the Iris Frit, I rolled it in the silver. And this was sort of a happy accident because I forgot to roll it in the silver before I put the Frit on. I was like, okay, well, I'll put it on now. And that created some really interesting looking reactions. So I kind of like that one. This next one is one with a red base, and that's similar to the one that I demonstrated earlier, where I had the clear, encased it with the red, put the silver leaf, and then the light Iris Gold Frit. So that's similar to the ones that I showed in the demo. This one here is similar to the demo bead as well. And the difference between this one and the one before it is that I blobbed down the red here. So in certain areas it's thick, and then you can see excuse me, some areas right here where it's lighter. I did not put as much Frit on, so you can see where the silver kind of created that gray tan colored webbing in between the blobs of Frit. So that's somewhat of a different look. So this next one is where I used the emerald green transparent, obviously. And so it's not quite as strong a reaction as the cobalt or the transparent striking red, but it's a really cool looking bead. So this was the green emerald base, completely covering it. I put on the silver, and in this case, I used the yellow Iris Frit. So it was the yellow iris instead of the gold. And so I think the yellow probably has a little bit less of a reaction than the gold, but it still looks pretty cool. And this one here was fairly similar in that I did not put the silver on it, and I used the gold, the Iris Gold Frit. And you can see there was quite a bit of a reaction there. So I think the difference between the one on the right and one on the left, on the right is the yellow Frit, Iris Yellow. On the left is the Iris Gold. This next one down, again, is a cobalt. I used, for this one, amber green Iris Frit. So that was kind of an interesting one with the blue base. I believe I did have silver on this one. This one here, again, was using the amber green iris on a blue base. And it was just larger chunks of it, and I allowed it to spread more. And you can see there's a lot of color reactions in this. And I believe the base of this, I completely encased it, so there's lots of blue underneath it. I may have actually reduced this a little bit, which is why it turned a little bit of brown. But that iris green base does some weird things. And this one here is, again, the blue base. And this one is yellow iris, but I applied the yellow iris from a stringer, and I didn't really melt it in much. You can see it's sort of three-dimensional and wispy. And so that's on a very thinly encased cobalt blue base. So there you have it, a couple of variations on a theme, playing around with different ways of encasing the base glass, the clear, different ways of putting on the frit, and you have a whole bunch of different looks. So be sure to check out my playlist on frit techniques. There are several videos already released, and there will be a few more coming up soon. Coming out are going to be how to pull flat stringers from frits, and these are great for floral beads. And I'm also going to have a new one coming out soon about how to use chunks and pull that into stringer. Sometimes you can get like a number 5 frit, which are chunks around this size, or sometimes you may get rod, actually in a rod it's a big 1-inch diameter cane, and you have to chop it up and you can use that. So I'll have a video on that coming out soon too. You can also take any of these size chunks or rods of glass and make your own frit. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So make sure you like and subscribe so you get notification of all the new stuff coming out. Thanks for watching. Bye.